Now let's speak with Chiagoziem Onyekwena, who's an information technology architect and writer of get.Africa, a weekly curated African technology newsletter platform. So let's hit the ground running. What do you make of the multi-layer issues surrounding the global shortage of chips and its undermining effect on production?
Yes. I listened to the previous contributor, and it's well known. COVID-19 has been a major player that had a major effect on the supply chain for semiconductor chips, and that's true. But it's also true that it has affected several other industries, and not just semiconductor industry. So there's a report by Goldman Sachs that came out earlier in the year that said up to 96 different industries were affected by COVID-19. The supply chain of up to 96 different industries. So what we are seeing at play in semiconductor chip industry in particular is COVID-19 and other factors. Like you also mentioned, there are two other factors that are at play, and this was brought to light by TSMC chairman Mark Liu. What he said was, so COVID-19 has caused an acceleration in digital transformation. So what that means is for people working from home, people learning from home, they are buying more devices, more home appliances, and this increased demand has also played a role. So digital transformation has been accelerated by some estimates 5 years, some estimates also 7 years, and that acceleration, a lot of suppliers are struggling to keep up, and that has played its own part. And then another point that Mark Liu brought to bear was the U.S.-China trade war. Now, there's an unpredictability around it. So there are a lot of sanctions on tech companies that were instituted by America's previous president, President Donald Trump. Now, the new president has shifted his tone, but he hasn't exactly changed the policies. Many of the policies are still, and there's some unpredictability around that. And being that like 56% of the semiconductor GPUs in the world come from Taiwan, so the TSMC and operators like them are not sure of the market direction. So there's also that unpredictability, and it has caused some of these shortages that we are seeing today. So it's a multi-layered problem, actually.
Right. And I like that you mentioned the percentage of semiconductor production that occurs in Asia, specifically Taiwan and China. So we spoke to a semiconductor expert. You heard a bit of that conversation, and he basically said that he believes that Africa is not ready to be a part of this production chain, and doesn't think that we should, in fact. And several analysts have said that it will take Kenya, who opened a semiconductor factory this year, years to better position itself as part of the global solution. Do you think that this is not a space that African countries like Kenya and those who have stable electricity, should play or not?
Yes, I think, well, you're right. It will take several years for us to be part of the global solution. So let's talk about Taiwan, for instance. How did they get to the position that they are now? Yes, they are the global leaders, but we didn't start off that way. What actually happened was in the mid-70s, one of the global leaders in semiconductor transistors, Radio Corporation of America, they were persuaded into moving some of their technology, some of their personnel, some of their know-how to Taiwan. And then over time, about 10 years later, TSMC, the leader we have today, and that has been the leader for several decades, was founded. And then who are the people that were in TSMC? A lot of the engineers that were part of the shift by RCA as they moved from America, moved their operations from America to Taiwan. A lot of those engineers are those that started companies in Taiwan. So, and that happened over a period of 10 years. It happened over, several millions of dollars were spent. So we go back to what's happening in Kenya, which is a very interesting development at the Dedan Kimathi University of Science and Technology, DECUT. So what has happened is that they've launched a factory. It's a public-private partnership with forwarding a U.S.-based company. But such initiatives are going to take a long time to mature. You need several millions of billions of dollars. You also need the manpower. Again, there's a shortage in that regard. So yes, we can play, but maybe a smaller part of the supply chain. and then it will be over a long period of time. But I agree, it takes several decades even before we can be part of the global solution.
Right. I'm from Bini, and we have a saying that goes "Edenaya your real," which basically means it is whenever you wake up that is your morning, right? So we may be getting into the game late, but I think that is worth getting into. And there's always anything good is worth waiting for. So I have one last question before I let you go, and I worry that we may have lost a bit of our audience to some of the technicalities in this conversation that we've been having. So can you please explain to the people listening why this semiconductor and chip shortage matters, how it affects them, and what some of the effects that we will see in the coming months and years maybe?
Okay, so let me put it this way. So the university in Kenya, that's get.Africa, and I'm sorry if I lost some of the audience in the technicalities, but so get.Africa, I also studied in a university of science technology like get.Africa. But back then, I mean, I graduated in 2009, not to show my age, but I graduated.
You already did.
But what we studied back then was a very small use case for semiconductors, mobile phones, personal computers, just really small use cases. But what has happened in the years that I've finished school is that semiconductors are being used in practically everything from our cars, our watches, our ACs, practically everything we do today has, there's some chips, the electronic chips are put into them. And so what that has done is to create this large demand. So the problem now is that such chips are becoming an integral part of our lives, more integral than they were maybe 10 years ago. It's affecting, several aspects of our lives. For instance, there are projections that the price of mobile devices will go up over the next few months. I'm not a gamer, but I'm also somewhere that PlayStation 5 and Xbox console are getting easier to come by. The auto industry has been hit. So these are some of the cases that we see the impact of the global. So what we've seen so far is a long delay and also cancellations, but also what I think this shortage continues to go on for months and maybe a couple more years, or even the time pricing that may not be easy to use, and I think that's what most analysts are seeing.
All right, thank you very much. It's been lovely speaking with you. Thank you for joining us on TechNow today.
That was Chiagoziem Onyekwena, an information technology architecture and writer of get.Africa, a weekly curated African technology news platform.
So you've been listening to, and you're still listening to, and you should continue. I feel like a rapper. And you should continue to listen to 95.3 FM radio now. And that's the show for today, folks. Thank you for joining us on TechNow, which happens every Tuesday and Thursdays from 9:05 a.m., where we bring you tech news, reviews, and interviews. My name is Tomi Olugbemi.
And I am S.I. Ohumu.
Have a fantastic day.